All right, so welcome to BART at 50 years. Tonight we have with us Bob Powers, who is the general manager of BART. He started that position in July of 2019. He manages BART's budget, capital projects, and oversees 4,000 BART employees. So he helps to carry out BART's mission to provide safe, reliable, clean, quality transit service while putting riders first and prioritizing the safety of all. Also with us is Mike Healy. Mike Healy was a longtime BART employee from 1971, which is shortly before BART started running, until he retired in 2004. He's the author of this book called BART, The Dramatic History of the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, available at your local library or through various retailers, published by Heyday Books. So I'm going to pass it over to them, and I will, start sharing their slideshow now.
So while you're pulling that up, Emily, first, again, my name is Bob Powers. I'm the general manager at BART. And Emily, thanks for having us. We look forward to the discussion, and I see a lot of familiar faces on the call here. Alita, very nice seeing you. Joe, I know you quite well. Paul Menaker is here. So it's just lovely seeing a lot of folks that have been, part of the BART family. So looking forward to the discussion. Mike, any opening comments?
No, except to make one correction. I actually left in 2005. I meant to leave in 2004 and they pulled me back. They wouldn't let me leave for managing a contract. So I continued doing that for the rest of the year, that year anyway. But otherwise, no, great to be here.
So Emily, we have about, 20, 22 slides or something like that. And Mike will take the first half of them and I'll take the second half of them. And then again, like you said, if there are questions as we're going through, Paul or Joe or whoever, Alita, if you have questions going on, just Emily will triage those raising of the hands, I think. And we're happy to have this interactive thing as we go through it. And then we'll have some questions at the end too. So with that, Emily, why don't we go to the first slide? And again, Mike is going to take the first dozen of these slides, I think.
Yes, Emperor Norton. Emperor Norton, I don't know how many people know about him. He was a San Francisco character back in around the late 1870s, actually 1872. In 1872, he decreed that there should be a tunnel between Oakland and San Francisco to carry whatever carriages. I don't know what he was thinking at the time. And also, he also outlined the plan for a suspension bridge. This is something that he learned as a kid when he was living in South Africa, which is where he actually grew up. But before he became Emperor Norton, he actually was a very successful businessman in San Francisco. And he put all of his money into rice coming from China or someplace. And apparently the market was undercut by another company. He lost all his money, disappeared for a few years, and then returned as Emperor Norton as protector of Mexico and Emperor of the United States. On the right, that is an old, I believe, Chronicle front page of a proposal by General George Goethals, who was the manager of the Panama Canal. And after he'd finished that project, he came to San Francisco and proposed a tube running between, and this is October 1920 now, this is even before the bridges, between San Francisco and Oakland. And he actually outlined, if you can see what's on the front page there of the paper, you can see the alignment, which actually BART followed almost 50 years later. Whether they knew that was proposed then or not, I don't know. But it's remarkable that the alignment was almost exactly the same south of Yerba Buena Island between the ferry building in San Francisco and the estuary in Oakland.
Next slide, please.
Any questions?
They'll raise their hands. Emily will triage that for us. Yeah.
This is Marvin E. Lewis. Now, Marvin E. Lewis was a prominent San Francisco attorney and also on the Board of Supervisors, San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And as an aside, I might add that he is actually the grandfather of Mark Benioff, who is the founder of Salesforce in San Francisco on his mother's side. Anyway, in 1947, when the Army Navy issued a report recommending that a tube be built between San Francisco and Oakland, it was going to just gather dust until Marvin E. Lewis picked it up and ran with it. He began holding public hearings and getting people interested in this whole idea. Now, at that time, the key system was operating in Oakland. And I think the Army Navy report suggested that it could connect with the old key system. Anyway, the reason for this was because before the war, they actually started this study, and then they shelved it during the war and then picked it up again after the war. And the reason for it was that they wanted to have some alternative transportation corridor to move troops in case they needed to in the event of war, and the bridge may be knocked down for some, during a wartime. So that was one of the motivations for doing this study in the first place. Anyway, Marvin E. Lewis ran with it. He got everybody interested. He even drafted legislation to for the state legislature to consider to create a study panel to study Bay Area transportation needs in the post-war years. And he was very successful in doing that. And eventually that led to the creation of BART by the state legislature in 1957. So this is one guy running with this and actually developing all of the interest that eventually took place.
Why don't we go to the next slide, please?
Well, anyway, so plans are starting to be made in the late 50s, early 60s. And these are renderings that were sort of promoting the whole idea of this new space age system to be built in the Bay Area. Now, at that time, before the state legislature created the BART district, which included, by the way, 5 counties, Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Marin County in the original district. And these were first renderings to try to promote the idea with the public that this was going to be needed as the key system was beginning to be on the decline.
Next slide.
This is B.R. Stokes. My first day on the job, just a little anecdote here. My first day on the job was November 15th, 1971. I came into the building at 814 Mission Street, which is where BART was headquartered at the time. And nobody was there. I got there early and nobody was there. My first day. I go to my desk, the phone rings. It's the San Diego Union, and they want to know a comment from me as to what our reaction is to Roar Industries going on strike. And I said, Roar Industries, what's that? Well, anyway, they were making the BART cars. So at that time, the date had been set, a tentative date had been set to open the line in the spring of 72. Anyway, I went around looking for somebody, told the reporter I'd get back to him, and the only person I found in the building was B.R. Stokes in his office. So I said, told him what was happening, and he said, well, listen, just go back and tell him we'll monitor it. We'll keep it under surveillance. We'll monitor it. One thing I noticed about Bill was he was kind of smiling. It was almost like a Cheshire smile. So before I left the office, I said, well, Mr. Stokes, okay, I'm Mike Healy, and I'll be around. I'm a new information officer. And he said, the name's Bill. And from then on, it was Bill. I went back, told the San Diego Union we would keep an eye on it. And of course, what I didn't realize was that BART was not ready to open in the spring in the first place. And I think he was relieved. Anyway.
All right, let's see what we have next, Emily.
All right, there's a question, I think, about the
Oh, yeah.
previous slide.
Of course.
What's the origin of the name Subaqueous Crossing?
What's the origin? Well, that was part of the report. That's how the Army Navy actually listed the or titled the report as a subaqueous tube. I think they said tube. I'm not sure, but anyway, that was actually on the official report.
So subaqueous as in underwater.
Yeah,
Right.
Underwater. Exactly. Yep. Any other questions? Okay. On the left, this is the groundbreaking ceremony in 1964. And President Lyndon Johnson came out to preside, or to be the featured speaker, of course. That's Adrian on the right here. That's Adrian Falk. He's the president of the BART board at the time. And on the far left is Pat Brown, governor of California. One of the things that I firmly believe came out of this was the creation of the Urban Mass Transportation Administration. There was no such administration prior to this, and Lyndon Johnson actually called for it because he believed that this was going to be a renaissance in new kinds of transportation, urban transportation in the country. And so it's a little aside, but I believe that that's an important part of the history of BART, that it was a catalyst in that respect.
Okay.
Well, on the left, by the way, I assume this is their left. On the left is the design car that came from a company called Sundberg Farrar in, I believe they're located in Michigan. And this was the first design they came up with. And by the way, the lab car that you see, the C car there on the lower right-hand side, a lot of people saw that in the news and they thought that's what the new BART cars were going to look like. But anyway, those were called lab cars, where there were 3 of them, and they were used to experiment with different signaling systems and other operations that could be applied to the new BART system when it was finally underway. Atop there, of course, is the original BART train with the sloped nose in the front. Anyway.
Okay.
So this is one of the sections. In fact, this is, I believe, the last section of the Transbay tube that was towed out and lowered down into place about 130 feet under the bay, under the water, in the trench. There were 57 sections stretching from the Oakland estuary south of the Yerba Buena Island and into the ferry building in San Francisco. This was considered really the key to the BART system. And it was probably the first time, and I think it was at that time, maybe the longest subaqueous tube in the world. I'm not sure, but I think it was at the time. Anyway, it was quite a feat. And these were launched, they were built in the Bethlehem shipyard in San Francisco and then launched like a ship down into the water, towed out, and then they were towed up to the Delta, where they put concrete in the sides and then towed back and then sunk down into place. And they used a laser between San Francisco and Oakland to align it because this had to be very, very tight tolerances in terms of the alignment for each section of the tube.
And just to add just an engineering perspective, Mike is the historian. Just look at the picture on the left there, the size of that, in scale to the folks that are around it. It really was an engineering marvel. It still is an engineering marvel. Why don't we see what the next slide is, Emily?
Well, these guys were working in the tube. And there was a kind of a competition going on between the Oakland side and the San Francisco side And so these guys, I believe, were on the Oakland side. And when each tube was put into place, there was basically a huge door between each one of the two doors. So when they opened the door from the San Francisco side, here are these two guys sitting there waiting for them with a nice bottle of wine. And that was really an iconic picture. And it made the news, and it was also celebratory as well because they completed the tube.
Okay.
On the left, that's Gertrude Guild. She was considered the very first official BART paying passenger. And on the right, these are the different uniforms that BART staff wore. On the far left, that's a train operator, and then a station agent, and then a line supervisor. And we also had like hostesses, and the woman on the far right there was a hostess, but we had 4 of them that would go out and help people with the fare machines or answer questions on the line. It was a good program, I thought. And of course, for an all new system, it was absolutely paramount.
There's another question here for you about the tube sections. It says, is there a maximum expected service life for the tube sections? And if so, how will they be replaced?
So what I could take the front part of that. Is that all right?
Sure, go ahead.
So we are right now, we're retrofitting. We have a big project that came out of our earthquake safety program. It was the final project there to retrofit those tubes in there, both the structural pieces of the tube, as well as the electrical system and the pumping system there. And so, with that retrofit, and then we upgraded its, from a seismic design standpoint, we upgraded its resistance to even a higher order of magnitude earthquake. And so it's, it'll be there for a long, long, long time, Emily, because it was retrofitted against from a demand capacity ratio kind of a thing to a very sizable, I think it was 1,000-year event earthquake that was it was designed for. So it's good, and for I don't want to put a number on it, but it's probably good for another 50 years.
I would add that one of the things I forgot to mention was that there are flexible joints at each end of the tube that allows enough movement so that in the case of some seismic activity, the tube has some flexibility. And as a matter of fact, there was a train during the Loma Prieta earthquake in the tube at the time. They didn't feel a thing. Had no idea what was going on.
No, and you would remember, Mike, if BART was up and running quite quickly after Loma.
We were, the bridge was down, and BART was the only game in town for the next month or so.
Yeah.
And we got a great editorial in the LA Times saying BART's finest hour. And also a relative of ours, Don Edwards, who was a congressman at the time in Congress in Washington. We got him to accommodate BART for being up so fast in Congress on the floor of the House.
Yeah, quite remarkable.
Okay, so there's a couple more questions and comments. Someone wants to know how much the Transbay Tunnel cost when it was first constructed.
188 million. Cheap. By today's standards.
Yeah, but comparatively, how much did the retrofit cost?
I think the retrofit that we have going out there is, Emily, I think it was in the, 300 million, 320 million, plus or minus, somewhere in there, I think.
Yeah, so more than the original construction. It's amazing, but times change.
And it's been a long time, right?
Yeah. Someone else says, in the fairly new Crane Cove Park in San Francisco, the former site of Bethlehem Shipyard, A full-size outline of the BART Transbay tube has been painted on a concrete apron that you can walk on. It gives a great idea of how big the tube is. Sounds cool.
Nice.
And someone else asked, would you agree that BART's second finest hour was the mask mandate?
Joe, nice to see you.
And someone wants to know if there are any pictures of curved tunnel sections. I believe that we actually have one in our collection in the Oakland History Center, although I'm not sure if it's the Transbay part or if it's just another BART tunnel, but I believe there is one.
There's a good way to tell. If it's a regular tunnel, you'll see the ridges of the steel sides, of the steel rims. If it's a tube, it's concrete.
Okay, yeah, I think it's just a tunnel then, not the tube. But yeah, I'll just throw in here that the Oakland History Center in the Oakland Public Library, the main library, we're up on the second floor. We do have a BART archive, so you're welcome to come in and read and look at pictures about BART anytime we're open. So, okay, I'll go on to the next slide now.
Okay.
Okay, I got a story about this. On the left there, of course, you can see President and Pat Nixon, and that's Bill Stokes sitting opposite them. I was actually asked to be the liaison with the White House for the president's visit about a month in advance. And so this guy from the White House came out, a guy named Red something or other, and we got very friendly and go out to lunch, and he'd tell me about life in the White House and all that. And as time got closer, you could feel the net actually closing in from the Secret Service got involved. And then finally, I got a visit one day from the Secret Service, and they said, now the president's coming in Oakland, and so we want you to decide what press can cover the president's visit. And I thought, God, it's like, it's sort of like Caesar, you go up or down, who's going to be able to cover it. So they gave me all the badges for the press. I had to get all the press members who were covering their social security number and gave it to the Secret Service. That was the one caveat. And anyway, then we all went out to the airport, and I handed out the badges as the press showed up. Then we took a caravan, actually car caravan, to San Leandro Station, where the president got on. And I actually got to show Pat Nixon how to use the fare machine. She was delightful, by the way. So then when we're riding back, I'm actually in the car, but behind. And standing next to me was Bob Haldeman, and he was taking 8mm pictures of the president in the BART car. And Ron Ziegler was on the other side of him, if you remember any of these guys. Ron was the press secretary for the president. And then there was a guy in uniform standing behind me. It was a major carrying a briefcase. I learned many years later that the briefcase was the football. Now, I don't know how many of you know what the football is. It is the nuclear buttons in the briefcase in case of a major issue or war or whatever. Anyway, so he was standing right behind me, and I said, "Oh my God, you're standing behind me with the football." But I didn't learn that until many years later. He happened to be a friend of a mutual friends and contacted me. So there on the right is Prince Charles, who is now the King of England. So it's nice to say we had the King of England on BART. And he actually was fascinated by BART and asked if he could sit in the operator's cab while the train was going underneath the bay. And we said, sure. And we put him in the cab, and he pretended to be an operator for a couple of minutes there. So he was surrounded by his own security plus Secret Service as well. And he asked a few good questions about BART, which I remember. And now I and the head of operations, a guy named Bill Fleischer, actually escorted him on the train and on the trip. So that was fun. Those were some of the fun things.
The Nixon card is still in service. It's gonna go to Western Railroad.
Is that right? Oh,
You should share that.
the car that the president was on is going to go to the Western Railway Museum in Rio Vista, and it will be preserved there. Maybe they'll even put a plaque on it or something. Who knows?
I'm sure they'll
It's
put a
still in
plaque.
service.
And it's still in service
Still in
today.
service.
A testament to how well we keep things running.
I think that's great. And if anybody, well, anyway, next slide. Okay. This is really an illustration of the impact that BART had on downtown San Francisco and elsewhere in along the lines as well, in terms of development and in terms of the growth and development. Before BART came along, Market Street was really pretty much dead. There just wasn't a lot happening. And then when BART came through, you began to see the emergence of new high-rise buildings along the corridor there. And now, of course, on the right is the more recent picture. I can see the Salesforce building sticking up there. And that's right now, I believe, the tallest building in San Francisco. So BART has had a major impact in the growth of the Bay Area. And this is probably one of the best illustrations of that growth.
Okay. And just a little bit. So the slide on the left is kind of how we started, how it started in 1972, as Mike said. You know, and when we opened, it was just the East Bay run, and it was from Fremont in the south there, you know, up to MacArthur, only 12 stations. And it was, I don't know how long that was, maybe 30 miles of track. That's when we opened. That's the picture on the left. Now, if you compare that to the picture on the right, there's 5 lines of service. There's 50 stations. We connect to 2 world-class international airports, San Francisco and Oakland. And, you know, we have over 130 miles of track. So you could just see, you know, over the 50 years, you know, how we've evolved over time there. And it's very impressive. And we've done that, you know, maintaining our reliability and, you know, having best in class maintenance records for our fleet, our fleet of vehicles that are out there. So just a nice before and after kind of a slide here. Let's see what we have for the next slide here, Emily. And so I just wanted a little bit to talk about ridership, and the slide on the left is a slide that really reflects our peak hour ridership, that, you know, historically how we've been, and even now a little bit. The blue line on the left of that graph is pre-COVID, and you can see how peaky we were, right? During peak hour in any system, whether it's BART, WMATA, New York City Transit, Chicago Transit, you know, that kind of that peak hour in the AM, and then the opposite, the peak hour in the PM. But you can see how we've, where we were in April of 2020, that's the gray line at the bottom. And then the 2 lines below are August of 2022 and September of 22. So we're starting to migrate back up a little bit, but you can see how the pandemic has really changed our ridership. And, you know, we just have a long way to go to recover. And, you know, the slide on the right, the chart on the right is just another representation. You could look at it from that perspective as well. And I can see that there was a question there about top speed. And so, you know, we have not to get too technical, Emily, but track circuits there, and we have speed codes depending on where you are in the system. If you're out on the L line out in Dublin, or if you're in Oakland on the Y, but top speed 70 miles an hour. And those places like out on the L line or out on the C line, we like to get to those speeds. And then depending on where you are in the system and what the track circuits are and what the speed codes are, it'll vary through there. But I just saw that. I just thought I'd answer that question at the same time, Emily. Why don't we go to the next slide and see what we have in store here. And so, this is for the future and looking. So Mike is a historian, but he's tracking on, what the future might look like as well. And so we have some pretty sophisticated modeling that we use that, looks at ridership. It looks at, planned Bay Area. Where's the Bay going to be, the Bay Area going to be in the next, 10 years of time. And we have different cases there. We have a base case, and then we have an upside and a downside, kind of some sensitivity runs there. And that blue line there is our base case. And you can see even with our highest up case side, or, that we're still only at around 80% of pre-COVID ridership, and base case around 70 and downside around 60. And so it's just going to be a bit, we all got to stick together as we navigate these uncharted waters, so to speak, on transit ridership and remote work. And there's just a lot of variables there, Emily, looking forward. But we're trying to navigate those data sets there. And then I have one from a question there from, if you don't mind me answering these as we go, Sarah.
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally flexible there. The question was, as you come into the Oakland Y on those curves, why does it slow down? And so that's a project that we have underway right now, that as you come into the Oakland Y, there's a restrainer rail there that helps keep that track, keeps that track aligned as the trains are going over it. And we're replacing some of that. So it's a pretty tight curve. I think it was a question from Sarah. So the tighter the curve there, the more stress on that rail. So we are replacing a lot of that restrainer rail in there. And so we hope to get a little bit quicker as we go through the Oakland Y, but that's why the Oakland Y, as you come into Oakland, that the speeds are reduced coming through there.
There is a story behind that, by the way.
Go ahead.
The curve would have been much broader had it not been for a department store called Simon's Hardware, basically. And Simon, who owned it, was a very good friend of John Houlihan, who was then the mayor of Oakland. And Houlihan came to BART and said, we're not going to let you come in here unless you change that curve. It's just going to be tighter. But otherwise, it would have required raising the Simon hardware store. And so BART changed the plan. And of course, the curve was made much tighter. And then 6 months later, Simon went out of business and the store went away anyway. Go figure.
And we have that, and we have to deal with that curve. So anyway, I did not know that story, Mike. That's great to know. But Sarah, good point. It is something. So let's go to the next slide, Emily. Where are we taking here? And so, we have a lot of programs and initiatives underway to improve the customer experience. Paying using your phone, whether it's the mobile, if you have your mobile phone, you hover it over the fare gates to pay for your fare. You can pay for parking with the app or with your credit card now. Half the trains running right now, Emily, on today, yesterday, tomorrow, half the trains that you see out in the system are now the Fleet of the Future trains. And it's just, it just such a different experience when you're on those Fleet of the Future trains than on the legacy fleet there. And, you know, when I'm out in the system, and that's quite often, everybody just likes those fleet of the future trains that are out there. So over half of them are now fleet of the future. New escalators, we're starting in downtown San Francisco, but you can see a picture of some new escalators going in there. We're really tracking and trying to improve on our delays in the system as the result of mechanical, electrical equipment that's out there. And so we're doing pretty good there. And then all our train cars have been fitted with MERV 14 air filters, which really what they do, the short version is they take COVID-19 particles out of the air. And that's industry best practice there. That's not one, that's every single car that's running in the system have those air filters in them. So let's see where we're going to go on the next slide here.
There's a question before you move on.
Yeah, please.
When will those legacy cars, A, B, and C series, be fully retired?
Yeah, and so it's hard to give it a specific date right now. We are, and I'll tell you why, and I'm not trying to, I'll give you all the information I can on it. So the goal was always to accept 20 new cars a month from our car supplier, Alstom, and we were doing pretty good. And then the cars would come in and we would test them and they would go into revenue service. And at the same time, some of the existing fleet would be taken out of service. And so we're humming along at about 20 cars per month, but there's some challenges now with manufacturing and some supply chain issues. But, you know, we hope to work with Alstom, and we are very closely with Alstom to get that as quickly as we can. And certainly within the next, you know, I would say 2.5 years, that we are gonna, every car out there in the system will be a fleet of the future car. There was an question here, Emily, about escalators. Were they foreseen or were they a BART surprise? I think it's two. I would answer that just from an engineering standpoint. You know, generally an escalator, if it's in a covered environment, its shelf life is a lot longer than escalators that are open to the air and open to the elements. And so those escalators that were opened, you know, they've experienced a very, very hard life, a very, very rough life. And so they needed to get replaced. The ones that were internal, maybe from the platform to the concourse, you know, they last a little bit longer, but it's been a long time. And so it's kind of, you know, issue specific on each escalator. And then sometimes we're replacing it with a brand new escalator, and sometimes we're just truing up, which is, you know, a major overhaul, but it gets us to the same point. So, you know, two different versions of that answer there. Why don't we see what the next slide is in store for the folks here? So hiring, here's a challenge. I think it's one of, as the general manager of BART, and I'm very hands-on, and I would argue that hiring of folks right now is one of the biggest challenges transit operators has, and it's not a San Francisco challenge. It's not a Chicago challenge. It's across the United States. And it's not just BART. And, you know, I think all industries out there are having a tough time hiring folks. Certainly the contractors and the consultants that are partnering with BART on work, and some of them are on this call, can attest to that. But our priorities on hiring are really what are those three check marks there? You know, hirings that improve fewer canceled trains, that improve a cleaner experience, and that improve a staff presence in the system. When you're on the trains, seeing ambassadors or sworn officers or CSI folks walking the trains, we're really focusing on those three themes when we hire folks there. Next slide. Here's a new program that we're very proud of. This is our Progressive Policing Bureau. We started a whole new progressive bureau within policing, our police department. We added a deputy chief and assigned a deputy chief to run this. And this is a combination of sworn officers, ambassadors, and crisis intervention specialists. And they team up and they are outriding the system. And it's really focused on the quality of life issues that folks are having that happen to be in the BART system, and maybe dealing with those quality of life issues with a non-sworn presence, with a crisis intervention specialist and an ambassador, and trying to get folks to where services and where they can be helped, and not going in with a sworn officer, heavy-handed approach. And it really we're seeing that it frees up the sworn officers to be dealing with issues that, warrant their assistance. And it's kind of been a win-win, and it's been a huge success in the industry. Folks, we send our program out and they're taking it and running with it, whether it's another transit agency or another city. And it's really been very progressive, progressive policing bureau, and very forward leaning, and folks just love it. So that was the intent of this slide, Emily. Very proud of our progressive policing bureau there. And then question?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, but I also want to ask, related to this program, is this the full staff in this picture here, or are there?
The total staff is 47.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many people are in there, and I don't know if that's right, because there's a couple of directors that are in that photo I can see on the outside. So that's probably not the full complementary of that staff, Emily, but it's 47 all encompassing.
And then someone in the chat is asking, in Brooklyn, New York, there's a transit museum and an old subway station. How can BART make its historical record more accessible?
Good, I've been there. It's a great museum. It's an old station, actually. They used an old station, excuse me, for the museum. And they have a lot of artifacts from, from time gone by. That's actually quite nice.
But does BART have any? We have an archive here at the Oakland History Center, but it's not.
We have archives
totally
here. We have a lot of materials here, historic materials here,
Mm-hmm.
and then we've been in discussions with Western Railway Museum, and between the two, there's a lot of information there, Emily, and we'll kind of land somewhere, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually at the Western Museum, and I actually was working with them for some time on this. They're hoping to get 3 cars over there, and they're going to build a mock-up station and platform, and then have memorabilia inside the trains. And by the way, for anybody who has never been out there, it's a great visit. It can be, for going out and riding on a train about 5 miles out, 5 miles back into then they use the old Sacramento Northern right-of-way for that. And it's an old time train, and it's just a lot of fun. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, and someone mentions that there are some historic photos on display at Lake Merritt BART station right now.
Yeah, there's still there's the photos from the 50th, our birthday party there, that we've kept up there, and photos on the windows of BART headquarters in downtown Oakland that we've kept up here as well, Emily. And so here's another, I guess, to, looking towards the future, I'm in the middle of a lot of discussions about the number of transit agencies in the Bay Area and how to better coordinate those transit agencies, how to better connect time meets, how to simplify wayfinding. So it's similar getting off of Muni onto BART or AC Transit to BART, and just working better together with all the resources that we have. And, the GMs in the Bay Area meet every week, every Monday morning, and talk about improvements and better coordination and initiatives that we have underway. And it is proving to be very, very beneficial and very tangible improvements on time meets and wayfinding. And it's just been it's been challenging the last 3 years with COVID and the hit to ridership, but you know, this is an outcome of that, and it's really going to help set the Bay Area up for success in the future. And so I just wanted to make sure that folks know that this, you know, there's hope on the way on coordination and connectivity. I think that might be the last slide, or there might be one more. I'm not sure. Oh, here's I'm told there's a couple more here. Very important slide here too. And this gets back to the prior slide. You know, we have on the fare payments, we have what's called Clipper Start, which is a means-based fare pilot program for low income, and 21 agencies throughout the Bay Area have partnered in it, and it's reducing fares, and you know, the 20%. So every fifth BART ride would be free, and we have many people that have qualified and signed up for this. And, you know, I'm advocating as the general manager for BART and many others, you know, is there a way that we could go to a 50% reduced fare? Is it, you know, can we do more than 20 for folks that are in need? Because transit, a lot of times, is their only mode of transportation back and forth from work. And so those discussions are ongoing. And then the Clipper Bay Pass pilot just launched, and it's with 4 universities in the Bay Area. It's a pilot program. It's unlimited transit access to all the systems in the Bay Area. It's going to be expanded to affordable housing residents in the Bay Area. And the initial data set that I just saw a few days ago was very, very complimentary, that people are using that and very, very excited about that. So it is, we look to pivot off of that and even do more with our partners in 23, but that's right around the corner here as well. And then I think the next slide is, so when I'm out in the system, there's probably 3 things that I get asked on a lot. First is, when are you going to get all new cars out there? The second one I get asked about probably is this one, is underground restrooms and opening the underground restrooms. And we've made a commitment. What? I didn't catch that question. We'll drop back to that question. We've made a commitment to open the underground restrooms in the subway stations that were closed since 9/11. And so we've already opened 4 of them: Powell Street, 19th, Lake Merritt, and Montgomery. And you can see the schedule here. And not only were we opening them, they're staffed. And so if you go and use the restroom, you can be assured that they're in good shape, that they're clean, and you can go in and use them and get out, and the next person will go in there. And just having them staffed has made all the difference in the world for our riders. And just that little amenity to the riders has really resonated with them. And you can see a picture of one of the stations being opened. Next slide. What was the question? Do we want to drop back to the question, Emily? You want to keep going?
I don't see a question, so
okay. Alrighty.
We'll keep going.
And the other one is just to build upon Mike's, you know, the last slide that Mike had showed the development on Market Street as BART came through, right? But that is not unique to there. That's happening everywhere BART is, and we have the capability to develop. And we're developing complete communities around BART stations. That's market rate housing, affordable housing, commercial, retail. And we're trying to do that work and partnering with the jurisdictions that we go through. And many, if not all of the jurisdictions that we're going through really want to partner with us and develop the area around BART stations. And, you know, our goal is 30% of the housing around the BART stations to be affordable on the whole portfolio level. And then any one project has to have a minimum of 20. And we really are, you know, part of the solution set to get to our climate action goals in California and the United States. And no better way to do it than housing and development around transit stations. And so we wanted to throw this slide up there too, Emily. And then I think there's one more.
Yeah, there's a couple questions.
Oh, okay.
I'll start with the one that's about this slide. Does BART own the land where a oriented development is being
Yes,
made?
we do. And we have a policy that we don't sell land. It's a very, very rare occasion that we sell land. And what we'll keep the land and then we'll lease it to developers to develop the building. So yes, we own the land. And here's one from Samarin. I'll just answer that when it came in, and it was about, so BART is unique in that, and I think I'll get this right, but so let's just use Paul Menaker, for example. So Paul, where Paul lives, he'll buy his power from PG&E, right? He'll pay a PG&E bill. We don't. BART doesn't source its power from PG&E. We source it from the grid. And we are 100% GHG free. That means we can source our power by hydro, solar, and wind. And we have a portfolio of that. And then I buy a little bit on the margins just for the ups and downs, depending on that. But the vast majority of it, I source from these clean sources to get us GHG free, to answer that, to Samaran's question there. What was, I missed the last question.
Okay, there's a
Emily.
couple, I'll read them out because there's a couple that are building up here. So
Okay.
someone's asking, if you replace parking with housing, aren't you just substituting one group of riders for another? Won't you lose the riders who cannot park?
No, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. We have a very sophisticated, all of our stations, we have a station typology, and some of them are urban, some of them are urban with parking, some of them are suburban, and some of them are parking dependent. So we have a typology there. And so when we go in to develop, let's say at West Oakland, we know the mix that we want to use, how much housing we want to keep there, or how much housing we want to put in there, how much parking we want to keep, how much parking we can go and develop. And so it's, I was just kind of nuanced there, but we have a tool there that we can change that, Emily.
Okay, and I'm curious personally about the rental fees that are charged for the properties. Do those go directly back to BART, or do
Yeah.
those go to, okay.
They do.
They don't go to the
it's-
developer.
I just want to caveat that, Aaron, it's right now where the market is, it's not a huge windfall coming into BART. For these deals to pencil out from a financial standpoint, sometimes we need to discount that land, and we've worked with the BART board on when and where to do that and by how much, but the math of getting these developments to work out is very tricky.
Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit to fares. Has BART considered eliminating fares entirely, and why or why not?
So the answer is no. And the background of that answer of no is there are agencies out there that have revenue coming in from other than fares, right? Or they're dependent, they get money from property tax, sales, more money from property tax, sales tax, parking tax, other revenue sources. BART historically has been the industry best in fare box recovery, meaning our fares were used to pay our operating expenses. And at a point, we were pushing 80% fare box recovery. That means 80% of our operating budget was paid by those fares. And so before any discussions on moving away from transit being free or BART being free, we need to figure out a revised funding structure of BART. And I'm having those discussions right now because of the hit on ridership with COVID. But agencies that are fare dependent, it is very, very challenging to identify another funding source to replace that.
Yeah. Okay, so another question, are there any climate related issues that BART is looking at?
Every design that we do, Emily, every single design that we do, there's a group, I have a sustainability group, and I have a group manager, and she runs that sustainability group. And every project that we do is looked at from an environmental standpoint, from a resiliency standpoint, from a sea level rise standpoint, to make sure that we're making smart decisions on that. So I have a group, as a project goes through 30, 60, 90, that they're involved in these projects from the beginning. And they're a resource for the Bay Area to tap into.
Okay, next question is for Michael. Can we back up a bit and talk about something barely covered in your book, please?
Sure.
Namely, how did the BART board get converted to an elected board and become an outlier? Also, part two.
Good question.
Don't you think BART's response to COVID-19 is BART's second finest hour?
Well,
From
going
Joe.
back to the BART board, that was a bill that came out of Sacramento to change the appointed BART board to an elected BART board, because there was certain factions that felt that the appointed board was not being responsive enough to the general public, and that elected board would be more responsive. And that was, I believe that was 1974 that the new board, which went from a 12 person board to a 9-person board. And usually it was around 2 people, or well, anyway, it was a 9-person board, and that was 1974. And it's been that way ever since.
Okay.
By the way, I'd like to say hi to Dee Van Lobensel's. I see her there. Dee and I worked together on several projects in the old days. And that's Paige, I guess, sitting there. Anyway.
Okay, so the next question is, after the extension to Santa Clara is complete, what other BART system expansions are being considered? And what's the likelihood that they will ever get built?
I think if we go to the next slide, there might be a, maybe we could pivot there. So a couple things happening here. We have the question was focused on the 4th bullet there, after we complete BART to San Jose, which, the term we use, or you might see in the papers, is ringing the bay with rail. And so, with that, we'll ring the bay with rail. We have a program called Link 21, and that's the 21 is the 21 county northern mega region. And we're looking at what it is kind of the master plan for rail in Northern California, but it's looking at where the demand, where people are, where the demand is, and where they want to go. So origins and destinations, and where the challenges are, where the bottlenecks are. And it's all the way from Sacramento down to, Stockton on the east, the San Francisco on the west side, and all the way, to Gilroy in the south. But it's looking at those opportunities there. And then it includes a second crossing that would not only be BART gauge, which is different than standard gauge. It would be both gauges, with a second crossing. And it would be laid out such that from a BART perspective, that we could run all the BART trains through a new crossing, should we need to do something to the old crossing. So there would be that redundancy back and forth. And so that's one of the guiding principles of that Link 21 program, as far as the BART element is gone. And that's being co-led. There's 3 leaders on that project: BART, Capital Corridor, which is the standard gauge representative, and then the state of California. And then we have this BART Metro study that's looking at enhancing core service and maybe even adding a 6th line. And so we're working on that. And, also in there will be, looking at potential infill stations. And do they make sense, whether it's in, somewhere in Oakland. So that there's kind of some new thinking going on right there, Emily.
Great. Okay, there's a follow-up to that last question. If money and political capital was no object, what's a dream expansion for BART that each of you would like to see?
Dream expansion for BART. Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, I think A dream expansion for BART. You know, too, I would say this, if you know, we're just having a discussion here and it's, you know, certainly the, you know, the second crossing is good from an operational perspective, and it sets BART up, it sets the Bay Area up for the future. And having a second crossing is, you know, very important there. You know, you might look at coming around, what happens, you come around in the South Bay. I know Caltrain is there, but are there some opportunities there with Caltrains? And then the other thing, I think, you know, I would also answer I'm just thinking out loud here, Emily. The other thing that I would like to get to, and I really, you know, if you're walking around the building here and you talk to me, it would be so nice to get to a place where BART is show and go, where you don't need to know if we're running 15-minute headways or 20-minute headways, that you and I, Emily, could just walk over the 19th Street station and know that within, you know, 5 or 7 minutes, a train is going to be coming, right? Something like London Underground, you never need to check the schedule there. You just know that, you know, in very short order, a train is going to show up, right? And get you to where you need to go. You know, I know that wasn't quite what the question asked me, but, you know, that's kind of, if I had my way, I would love to see that kind of show and go service in the Bay Area. Mike?
It's my dream
Well, I was
too.
going to say that the dream, I think one of the dream expansions would have been into Marin County. But and even now, going into Marin County, it could hook up with a smart train and still provide a service to those people who are still crossing the bridge in terrible traffic every day from Marin County. So that would be one thought I had anyway.
Yeah. Someone is just commenting that having moved to San Francisco from New York City, they can attest to the superiority of the BART transit experience. And thanks you for your hard work. And then someone asks, has BART also been involved in sharing its expertise somehow for California high-speed rail connecting San Francisco to LA?
Yeah, so, you know, they're part of our, on that link 21 that's up on the slide right now, that link 21, there's however you want to frame it, a program executive team, and high-speed rail is on there. And high-speed rail would be coming up the corridor in the South Bay with Caltrain. And, you know, there would be certainly an opportunity for them to come all the way up and cross that link 21 and then head all the way north into Sacramento.
Okay, why did BART decide to go with eBART to Antioch instead of a full-length extension?
So a little bit before, that might be a little bit of a gap between my tenure at BART and Mike's tenure at BART, but I'll do the best I can. So when that extension came up, you know, I think they were both going, you know, the eBART one, or maybe it should be Big BART, we call it in the office here. And it really came down to a cost. And it was less expensive to go with the eBART version that's out there right now. And I'll tell you, even the BART board has asked me to go back and look at, you know, in the future at the appropriate time, whenever that is there an opportunity to electrify that line from a sustainability, from an environmental standpoint? So, you know, when that decision was made, it was a financial decision, Emily. And, you know, we're going to look when the opportunity is there that we convert that to an electrical system.
That's diesel now, I think.
Oh yeah. Maybe Emily, Mike had mentioned to me, maybe if you stop sharing there, we could look at each other on the screen.
Sure. There we go.
Beautiful. Anyway, it's your meeting, and I just always like to look at folks. Yeah.
There's a bunch more questions here. We have about 20 minutes left, so I'll just read these out to you.
All right, we will do our best, Emily.
Okay.
No promises.
How are you reducing operating costs with only a fraction of the ridership?
Yeah, it's it's something that keeps me up at night. It's a very complicated challenge because of our fixed costs. And so a couple things we're doing. We're very, I told you on the hiring, Emily, I'm being very, very strategic on the hiring. That's one area that we're really focusing on. You know, the other thing is on the energy side, the biggest part of our, but the second biggest part of the budget after labor is energy. And we're looking at our energy portfolio there to make sure that we're getting the most out of what we're paying there. And if there's opportunities to reduce those costs there. So it's something that keeps me up at night.
Okay, next question is how come the Oakland Airport connector went with a small cable-driven system instead of a direct BART line or a self-propelled system like the O'Hare People Mover?
Yeah, that project, I know the answer. You wanted to give it?
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
I'll give you the technical answer, and Mike can give you the historic answer. Which you want to go first?
Well, actually, that project was on BART's radar screen back in 1971. And at that time, they explored the possibility of a spur line going there, but it wasn't practical. And what we finally figured out all these years later was that it needed just simply a connector system from the Coliseum to the airport, which is about 3.5 miles roughly. And that seemed to be the answer. And then when the bids came in, the connector that was chosen was for its engineering and for its cost. And that's really what happened.
Yeah, we put out, it was a design build contract when we put out a performance spec and we didn't specify the technology. And Mike's right that from a cost perspective and a life cycle costs, the capital costs and the O&M costs, and we got a 25-year O&M agreement with Doppelmayr, who is the operator out there. You know, they went with the cable car, the pulling cable, just like a ski lift.
Okay, next question. Are you considering running a line down the 680 corridor from Walnut Creek to Pleasanton?
From Walnut Creek down to Pleasanton. No, we haven't really studied that a lot. I think there was, in a different life and a different job at BART, I had, that was one area that we kind of looked at and gave it some thought, and then migrated over to other areas. But that corridor certainly is a lot of general purpose traffic and a lot of cars on that corridor. So maybe at some point in the future, Emily, but we really haven't studied that intently.
All right, and then someone else is saying it would be nice for BART to connect to the Central Valley, Tracy, Manteca, Stockton. Just a
so we
comment.
will, not BART, but there's the Valley Link project coming, and they're working on their environmental document, but that will extend from Dublin Station out going east all the way over the pass, Tracy, and then it wraps around, I think it wraps around north up into the Stockton area. And so folks from there can get on that system. It'll be a cross-platform transfer at Dublin and then jump on BART, and you can head into Oakland, San Francisco, or south into San Jose. But yeah, it's called the Valley Link, and that project is moving forward.
Okay, someone's commenting it was a great presentation with fascinating, well-told stories from the past, and thank you. They want to know where they can see or find more historical photos online or elsewhere. And I can answer part of this. Come to the Oakland History Center. We do have not enormous, but a good collection of photos, especially from when BART was first starting up. That's when most of our BART photos
and
are
then
from.
Emily, if the BART.gov/50 years, easy to find. There's photos, there's videos, there's interviews, there's all kinds of nice historical references there that the folks on this call can peruse through.
Great. And someone asked, did labor costs go down when ridership went down? Did labor costs go up when ridership went up under some provision of one or more labor contracts?
So kind of a tricky question. I would answer that question in a couple pieces. So the partnership that BART has right now with labor has never been better. When COVID hit, right when COVID hit, I met with labor, our 5 labor unions, and we looked at, where, and nobody knew COVID was going to go for 36 months or 30 months, 36 months. And so we locked in on labor agreements with our 5 labor unions, and we tied it to ridership, increased in ridership, and which really was, 0 raises, for that duration because of the impact that COVID had on our ridership. And, labor really was part of the solution with us when COVID hit. We had early retirement, that, cost us a little bit up front, but saved us a lot on the back end. And they partnered with me on that and getting that word out. And I think that saved us $20 million, and then it gets compounded over time with the savings. So labor has been a very good partner with us. And, I guess negotiating those wage increases at zeros tied to ridership, I guess the answer would be yes.
Okay, backing up to the Valley Link subject, someone asked when that might be completed.
I was pretty involved in it for a while, and then I passed it off to an AGM. I'm not sure the timeline on that. I think they're working on they have their SEPA document, their state environmental, they're getting their federal document. And, with all the opportunities for funding, historic amount of opportunities for funding on transportation coming out of the Biden-Harris administration, they're they're putting their hat out there and their case out there to get funding for that. So, and likely they're very competitive in this, just historic amounts of opportunity, working and partnering with our federal allies there. So, I think it's, probably the same timeline as VTA phase 2, or maybe a little ahead of that. I don't.
Okay, there's one more question right now. Has BART ever considered an extension to Livermore from the current end at Dublin Pleasanton?
So we did. We had a whole look at BART to Livermore. And we looked at different alignments going down the expressway there, alignments going out and, getting out of there and heading into the community, and different technologies, BART, express bus. And so the BART board decided a few years back that it wasn't the right time and for a BART extension to Livermore. And they kind of recommended, if something happens there, maybe it's better suited for an express bus, and we had the express bus lanes all laid out with new ramps and directly into the stations and all that. But, fast forward now, Valley Link picked up and is somewhat the replacement for BART to Livermore, because it comes in right to the Dublin station where BART ends. And it's a cross-platform transfer, just like eBART is. And so would be an extension of the BART system.
Great. One last one here. Question for Bob Powers. Have you guys ever studied making the trains automated?
The driverless trains, we really haven't looked at that. It's maybe that's way further down the road, but that's not one of the areas that I'm focusing any attention on right now, Emily.
By the way, that was the original concept, that our trains would be driverless, that they'd all be automated totally. But it was finally decided somewhere along the way that maybe we need an operator in there just to make sure in case there's an emergency. And so that's kind of what happened.
Wow. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So last chance. Oh, someone jumped in there. A follow-up, it's fascinating how much of the original system is still in place 50 years later. BART was the first system designed to be completely computer controlled under normal operation, which must have been a monumental task in the 60s and 70s. There is the CBTC project to replace the train control system, but I'm curious how much, if any, of the original control system is still in place today.
Yeah, there are a lot of sections in the system that are still running that software and those controllers right now, and hence the need to go to CBTC, you know, and migrate away from the track circuits that are out there. And I would say, you know, the front end of that question about, you know, BART being 50 years old, and many of the systems that are still out there are still, you know, of that age bracket. It's just a testament, Emily, to the frontline men and women who have maintained those systems, whether it's traction power, SCADA, track circuits, all of that has been maintained to a state of good repair by the frontline men and women. And it's just you know, I can't be more impressed with the folks that have worked here. And it's really so impressive that BART is able to do that. And it's but for the folks that have been doing it for 25, 30 years. And I would just add also, you know, a perfect example is we've done such a good job on that. We can't find parts for our existing fleet. And so when we take cars out of service, the existing fleet with the new fleet coming in, we're taking parts off those cars so that we have them available if we need to repair an existing car, you know, with parts, because we can't get those parts anymore. And so, and in some cases, we set up little machine shops in our yards and shops to recreate these pieces. And so, I mean, that's the ingenuity of the BART employee, and it's just very impressive.
Yeah. Okay, one more question here, and I think that's going to be the last one, which is the Valley Link proposal seems to duplicate ACE. Won't they be competing for passengers?
I don't think so. You know, and maybe that's probably not a best question for me, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be complementary, and I think, you know, coming in and dropping off at BART at Dublin there, and you can wrap north and you could head up into Richmond, or you can go over into San Francisco. I think it's more complementary than it is a competition.
Great. Okay, so several people are saying thank you. It was a great presentation. I'll say thank you for myself for being here, including the presenters and all of the audience members.
Yeah, nice to see some familiar names up there. Nick Warnoff, for one. Hi, Nick.
Yeah. Do you want to add any closing thoughts, or?
No, it's just I'll start. It's just an honor to be here and to be asked to be here. And it's, you know, BART, I'm just going to use the term, and I hope, Alita, I hope you're okay with it. Alita's, you know, calls in and makes a lot of very insightful comments at the BART, and what she calls, and we've used it now, BART is the people system. I may be here as the general manager, and Mike, his long career with BART and the historian, but it's the people system, and we're here, you know, to serve the people. And I just think that how important BART is to the Bay Area. It's just an honor to be part of the BART family.
Mike, do you want to add anything?
No, I've enjoyed it very much. I had some good questions, and of course, we just scratched the surface, in my view.
Yeah.
There's so many stories over the
Yeah,
years that have taken place. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, read the book by Mike Healy. Come to the Oakland History Center. We have a lot of files. We have scrapbooks, photos, all sorts of things about BART. And we're close to the Lake Merritt BART station. So
Great.
Hope to see you sometime soon. Thanks, everyone, and we'll end now.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Very nice seeing everybody. Thank you so much.